Well, Jello again. This is Buck Benny speaking here in the middle here, but it might not be the middle for you. I don't know where it shows on your screen, so we'll figure this out. But anyway, we have just Bob with us again. Oh,
Bob
dang,
here.
we never figured out if Jim's going to have a code name or something. Do you want to be Jim? Do you want to be Jim the Fabulous? I don't know what you want to be.
Just Bob.
Just Bob.
That's my name.
Two just
Oh, that
Bobs
was
today.
already taken? What is the chance that it's taken already? Jim would be sufficient.
Jim, okay, we'll go with Jim. Great, yeah. See, we prepped ahead of time to get ready to bring this to you seamlessly, and yeah, this isn't happening. Anyway, if you're wondering, because you're seeing what's behind me, that's an eyeball that's behind me. So there's the eyeball. But, I'm trying to cover it up. So you guys
I gotta move this way
eyeball.
so you can see the elephant.
Oh, yes. And yeah, so this is Buck Benny speaking. Welcome to another series of introductions we'll do. On YouTube, we do all the introductions just straight out because I don't know how to edit Worth Beans yet. So they just go up this way. Someday I will cut them to pieces and like do a more normal presentation. But whatever, at least you get us on YouTube a little bit. Now, for the shows, they're edited down to go with these shows. First thing I want to talk about, and it's the reason I have the Twilight Zone thing going, is because Bob was going to mention that last week the episodes tied into a certain Twilight Zone episode. And actually, one of the episodes this week ties into Twilight Zone too, so that's kind of interesting. But Bob, you didn't give us a spoiler last week because you said you didn't want to give a spoiler away. So what was the episode that it reminded you of, or do you remember?
I do, but the exact name, I think, is The Real Martian Please Stand Up.
Yes.
And that's the one where they're in the diner and they have to stay there because of a storm, people on a bus, and one of them is a Martian. They're trying to figure out who it is.
Correct. And what's kind of cool, because Bob mentioned this last time to me off camera or whatever, and I thought, wait a minute, I'll bring us the theme song to from Rush. Rush created a song called Twilight Zone that was, I was going to say a big hit in the 70s. It was not a big hit. It came out in the 70s. Let's put it that way. But what's interesting is it only talks about 2 episodes in that song, and one of them is the one Bob just referenced. The Real Martian Please Stand Up is one of the episodes it sings about. So if you just heard the song, it came in, now you get to hear the tie-in from that song to this. And I really like that song. It's from Rush's album 2112 that came out in what year, Bob?
76.
Yes, 76. And what I like about that whole thing is that it was that album. Rush had released a first album that was just called Rush with a different drummer. And then they got Neil, how do you say Neil's name?
Peart.
Peart?
Peart.
They got Neil Peart, who is a great drummer, one of the best drummers of all time. He came on in their second album, I believe. Yes, Bob?
Yep.
Yeah.
Fly By Night, yeah.
And so that album was Fly By Night. And the record company's like, oh, this is getting good. We're progressing on. We've got a big hit, Fly By Night, all that. Fly by night, away from here. Okay, so they come up with that. And then they release Caress of Steel, which lands with a big thud. And the record company's going, oh, wait a minute. We're going to have to take things over. You guys can't do this. This is not going to work. And Rush is like, and Bob will correct me if I'm wrong, Rush is basically like, no, we still want to do what we want to do. And the record company is like, if you do what you want to do and it lands with a thud again like that, you're done. It's over. And so Rush, but if you guys do it the way we want, and it doesn't go that great, we'll stay with you guys, And Rush goes, no, we're going to do it our way. So then they release 2112, and it's like their biggest hit ever until that point, right? And completely changes their career. And for the rest of their career, they can do whatever they want on every album. They never get approval by anybody, and they get a chance to do all these wonderful albums. Now, 2112, the first half of it, side 1 or side A or whatever you want to call it, is all essentially one concept. It's a concept album that has the story of 2112 on that one side, which is the side everybody talks about, the side everybody gets into, and all that. Personally, it's okay. I'm not always into listening to a 20-minute performance. I love side B. Side B starts out with we're on the train to Bangkok,
Cock.
aboard
Yeah.
the Thailand Express. Great song.
Yeah, it's about
Anyway,
drugs.
and it's got Twilight Zone on there, and it's got a number of short songs, so it's more like a regular album. So I love that album. Listen to 2112 if you get a chance. Listen to, well, if you like Twilight Zone, that's the album it's on. And and I'll create a link to my playlist from Rush that I created on Spotify. It is a playlist, I think I called it Short and Sweet. It's all the Rush songs that are really interesting to listen to, but are short. None of them are the really long mega songs. I think I gave myself kind of a 5-minute limit, and so they're all 5 minutes or less. It spans their whole career, and it starts, the number one song on there, even before I did this podcast, was Twilight Zone. Not because it's my favorite song in the world of theirs, I just think it's kind of cool and a kind of a neat nod that they did to Rod Serling in the Twilight Zone. The other thing, one last Rush fact I'll give you with Twilight Zone and with the whole thing. In Crest of Steel, when did it come out, Bob?
I think that's 75.
75. Yeah, it had to be 75. So in 75, they come out with this album, Crest of Steel, and it's dedicated to who? Rod Serling from Twilight Zone. Bob, did you know it was dedicated to Rod Serling?
No. Yeah, no, I didn't.
Bob gets new information. I assume it's because Rod Serling died in 1975, so I think that's probably why it's dedicated to him, because he died right then. So anyway, there we go. Lots of Rush information for us. I think we're going to shoot. Should I? Let's go with, we're going to go out of order, like I told the guys. We're going to go with Parigi's Wonderful Dolls first, because it ties into Rush anyway. So it doesn't tie into Rush. It ties into Twilight Zone. So let's talk about George Lefferts' Parigi's Wonderful Dolls. Bob will give us a quick summary of what's going on in that episode.
So this is a story of a little girl and her mom picking up a doll at a shop, and it turns out to be the kind of the classic possessed doll story. Very spooky. I think the rest of us were talking. I'm not real fond of dolls and clowns either. They both spook me out. So definitely spooky, especially I'm sure in the 50s it was even more spooky.
For sure. Jim, you got anything about this one that you kind of struck you at all or anything?
Well, it's a doll story with a twist.
How was the twist? Did you think the twist was surprising to you, or was it?
Yeah, I think it made it a little more than just a creepy doll story.
Good. Excellent. I think a great one for you to listen to. I again want to perk up George Lefferts, who writes this, because I cannot imagine. I cannot fathom how you as a writer would go, oh, we're going to adapt a Ray Bradbury story this week. Oh, we're going to do another famous author this other week. You've got all these huge names in science fiction that you're adapting stories from. And then they say, oh, this week we're not going to adapt anybody. Can you just write us something that's equally as good as all these other writers? And you go, oh yeah, sure. Let me just pound something out here. And yet he does. He writes these wonderful stories that maybe on most cases aren't quite as good as the stories like, say, by Ray Bradbury and so forth. But how could you even expect him to get in the ballpark of that? And so pretty amazing story. The reviewer that I read all the time, which is on OTR Plot Review, I think it's called, he rates this as a 3-star story, and he gives very few 3 stars. I mean, he's given Ray Bradbury 2 stars before. So pretty impressive that George Lefferts could come up with this great story. The other thing I thought I'd mention about the whole doll thing, those scary dolls are just one of those things that freaks out so many people in our society. I love in Jaws when Quint is talking about the shark and says, when the shark bites you, it's an amazing thing. It's scary. eyes are like a doll's eyes. They'll roll back in his head as he's biting you. It's and that whole thing that's scary in and of itself in Jaws. And and Jaws, I will say, is almost a horror movie in itself. That way it keeps coming back, like a character in Friday the 13th or whatever. It's relentless, and it's less of a shark story or a fish. It's a fishing story. It's more of a horror thing, but it's amazing. If you haven't watched Jaws lately, watch that again. I think we're on its anniversary. I think it's who knows what that.
I think that's 70. I think that's 75 too.
75. I know it came out in 75. So big 1975 year that we're talking about here. You watch Jaws and put on Rush 2112, or do it at the same time. Turn down the volume on Jaws. Listen to 2112 as you watch Jaws. You'll get a whole new listening experience.
Exactly.
Sound good? So we will leave unless anybody has any parting thoughts on Parigi's Wonderful Doll. Oh, wait, I have a parting thought on Parigi's Wonderful Dolls. We're going to tie it into Twilight Zone. We didn't even do it. There's a Twilight Zone 5th season episode. Ooh, I'm spacing on the name. It's with Telly Savalas. It's with the little doll, Talkie Tina doll.
Tina.
I'm Talkie Tina. And it's this spooky episode, and then there also is a 3rd season episode called The Dummy, with, of course, a ventriloquist dummy that comes to life and so forth. And that's a whole nother scary concept that's been done to death. But a lot of these times, and that's the other thing we talked about with a lot of these shows, you got to realize, you got to take it in and say, okay, this is 1950. So this story is not done to death. It might feel like it's done to death now because it's been done in the movies in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, right? But back then it wasn't done to death. And this Parigi's Wonderful Dolls would be a more unique story than it is now. That's all I'm saying. So we'll jettison that, move on to the next one. Let's talk. We're going to, and I should do another intro. So, hello again. This is Buck Benny speaking. Welcome to another episode of X-1. We have Ray Bradbury's The Velt, one of the highest rated episodes in the history of X-1 or Dimension X. You're in for a real treat. I love it when Ray Bradbury does the episodes. And Bob will give us another summary of The Velt.
I guess first off, we figured out the word veld means a place, an open plain in Africa. So that's the tie-in. So this episode is a classic story of what it means when you don't have a purpose in life. So there's this house that they build that does everything for them. Cooks, it cleans, it has a room that they call the nursery. Is nursery, I think. Yeah. It's kind of like the holodeck. It entertains the kids. It can create their own adventures in there, and that kind of becomes their parent.
When Bob says like the holodeck, he means the holodeck on Star Trek. Who aren't following the line, it's on Star Trek Next Generation. Is probably it's featured the most of any of the Star Treks, and this episode definitely reminds us of the holodeck experience. The other story that this is very similar to in some ways is There Will Come Soft Rains, again by Ray Bradbury, that we played for you a few weeks ago, I think. But this is just a wonderful story that really sucks you into it. And I thought the whole concept of the holodeck is interesting. Jim, you got anything about this story? What did you think of it?
Well, I want to know where I can get one of those houses. For $60,000, it sounds like a
that was 50s money, though. You got to
yeah, that'd be a bit expensive now, but and I find it too, kind of funny because at the time, they're talking about everything's automated, and the wife has, now I have nothing to do to take care of the family in the home because everything is automated, and it's just so different from now. People be like, it's like, yeah, automated, that's great, that's what I want, but then it was a horrible thing, left them with nothing to do. They were a housewife, and that was their role in life.
Right. Well, and now we're realizing there's always more we can do, and it just seems like for years, it was sort of like, oh, when you retire, what do? You do nothing. I mean, just sort of, and then people would die too. Like they retire and 2 years later they're dead because they've lost their purpose in life. But now it seems like there's so many things you can become involved with, so many things you can do, whether it's on the internet, whether it's podcasts like this, whatever a person is doing. I mean, Jim and I were talking just this week about, he was saying, oh, this podcast will be a really nice thing for you to do when you retire. You can even do more of them and that sort of thing. And that's kind of where what I think I am going to do. But it's just such a different mentality than it used to be, even just a few decades ago, of where a retiree does nothing or you just go and sit somewhere. And now it's, no, what are you doing? Well, I'm volunteering here. I'm doing this thing. I talk to all kinds of people that volunteer, and they will tell me I'm busier now than when I was working because I'm doing like 7 or 10 different things. I'm helping out at my church. I'm doing this thing with the giving out food to people. I'm working in the soup kitchen. Which is great, which is fantastic. But
yeah, so I would take a house like that, maybe minus the nursery.
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking,
I like the nursery.
How does it tie into, of course, the VR things that we wear? I mean, that's essentially as close as we get to a holodeck as you put on the VR thing.
I guess the thing that can happen to you, like, and I think Star Trek has looked at this issue, is you get so sucked into it that's all you do.
Right. Well, you're living this alternate reality.
Yeah, and it actually kind of mirrors some of today's society, just in that, people get so tied up in this online virtual reality that they have online versus real life, and so they are stuck in that environment, and they use that environment rather than what doing things in real life. It's like your friends are all online, and you do all these things online and not in real life. So it's
you don't know who your neighbor is because you never go out of the house to see them. Maybe
exactly.
No interaction on your street or anything.
I mean, I interact with my neighbors online more than I do in person.
Yeah, I think that's true unfortunately for a lot of people, and some people take it to a unhealthy situation. I've definitely seen a number of TV shows kind of present this side of it. Certainly our procedurals will present someone who's done this and then commit a crime, and they don't really realize why it's a crime because online they kill people all the time or something, and then they do it in real life and they're like, what? I don't understand. I never got in trouble for killing all these guys online. And it's like, okay. Yeah. But it's a whole interesting concept, the concept of the virtual reality and how people get sucked into it and things. Any other thoughts on this episode? I mean, I guess we didn't get from Bob other than the summary. Did you enjoy the episode? What did you think?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I agreed with everything that was said, other than, like I said, now people have more purpose. I think when you lose your purpose in life, that's when you sort of lose your reality. And I think that's why it's so much better now to retire, because you have all these options, or people have developed options. I don't know how it changed, but people aren't just sitting around, like you said. I think when you lose your purpose in life, then that's kind of really your downfall.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like you said, you don't know why, because it's not like the things I mentioned a few minutes ago. Most of them weren't online stuff. I mean, sure, you can do podcasting like I do, but like I say, when I talk to people, it's not usually that. Sometimes it's that they do a podcast or they do something online, they make YouTube videos or whatever. But generally, it's more the working in a soup kitchen, the things that you could have done that in the 70s or the 80s. I don't know why. Maybe part of it is that society maybe is more willing to allow someone in their 60s, instead of just going, oh, no, it's too much work for you to work in a soup kitchen. You should not do that. I think they're more likely to say, oh yeah, come on, help us. This is good. And I think we utilize folks that are older. We're more willing to utilize them. And certainly Walmart's willing to utilize them as greeters and so forth. But I think companies too are more willing to work with them. And I see a number of retired age folks working at, say, McDonald's and things that you wouldn't have seen 15, 20 years ago.
That's probably more out of necessity, though, unfortunately.
Correct. Yeah, it can be for sure. Some of the
Although there are people that do it because they like to, visit with people and stuff. Like I can sit at home or I can go do this and interact.
and probably live a lot longer because I'm interacting with people and things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
But I guess I'll go on that. Speaking of McDonald's, because I've been there in the mornings, different times.
Have you tried the new Big Mac today? Sponsored by.
We're not a commercial podcast, my friend.
I thought we were doing
Jim obviously doesn't know how we function here. But no, what I was going to say is I've been there in the mornings, and there might be a group of 8 retired folks all sitting around talking to each other, and they get together. I don't know if they get together every day or once a week or what it is, but it's pretty impressive to see them come together and having this social gathering there. And that's got to be healthier than sitting around in your home watching, Gunsmoke.
Price is Right.
Price is Right.
Yeah, I mean, like Bob said, you have to have a purpose in your life.
Agreed. All right.
An automated house in the 50s took away that purpose for some people.
So, Jim, you have anything else on this episode, or are we good?
No, I think we're good.
All right.
I'm Jim, by the way. Okay.
Yeah, we know. Just Jim or just Bob or whoever you are over there. Oh, here's another thing. Just before we go, I was trying to find my scrapbook, and I've got it around here somewhere. And I have all my pictures that we had in elementary school from kindergarten through 6th grade or whatever. You'd have those pictures where you'd take them with your teacher and you'd get the picture taken. I know. Well, I don't know. I think Jim can help me out with this. I think Jim and I were in kindergarten together.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Was Bob in our kindergarten class? He wasn't. So it was you and I in kindergarten over at Valhalla Elementary School.
Yeah.
Then we both transfer over to Lake Duluth because it was the new school that just opened up. We went there its first year. And maybe it was first grade. At one point early on, there's the 3 of us in a picture. I know that. Maybe it's first grade that we were, but I didn't know Bob at the time, but he's in the picture. But I knew you. I knew you even in kindergarten. We actually knew each other, I believe. And then and kind of throughout. Some years we were closer and some years we wouldn't be and stuff. But it's kind of cool to be doing a podcast with 2 guys that I've known since elementary school. So that's pretty neat.
Yeah. We looked younger then, though.
Yeah. I don't know about you. I've gotten better looking throughout. So.
Well, you had no place to go but up.
Thank you, Jim.
You're
enjoying this week as a guest podcaster. You'll never be back again. All right, enjoy the episode, and we'll see you guys next time. All right, now our third. Let's see where we're going. Oh. All right. I
gotta go now.
This is the quality. Okay. We'll explain this as we go. This is what I call the Leonard Nimoy podcast. I don't know. Leonard is probably going to be mad at. He's rolling in the grave, looking at me, going, "What are you doing? Don't do this." So this is a Leonard Nimoy Mutual Radio Theater show of Genji, a Space Traveler from 1980, October 3rd. And I didn't even think about this till we're going to bash the heck out of this episode. Sorry. Interesting episode to listen to just because it's so dated. And the guy is talking, seems like in 70s sort of jive lingo he's using, and it really makes it sound dated. But there's tons of issues with this. But I think what's interesting is, and I didn't realize it until I was listening to it this time, Leonard Nimoy introduces it, and he usually narrates throughout, but he doesn't narrate. It's done by a different person doing the narrating than Leonard Nimoy. I wonder if he just sort of read it and said, "I'm out. I'll introduce it."
I want no part of this.
So, Bob, you want to try?
I'll try.
Thing?
It's very difficult to summarize because it's kind of a little disjunct. So it's about an artist who meets a space traveler named Genji. And I guess her purpose is to show him his purpose in life and take him on adventures. It's
Wow,
so
well said.
it's
good
so disjunct. It's kind of the plot line's a little disjunct and goes off in
Jim,
many directions.
what do you think?
It was definitely a different kind of episode, one hard to listen to. You know, I could see it losing its audience as it plays.
Yes. We were talking earlier about the fact that we air it without any commercials, of course, right? And so it makes these episodes end up being 40 minutes long. But if you would have heard commercials, we all agreed by about the first commercial break, or at least the second commercial break, you'd just be gone. It just, the story takes so long and really never goes anywhere. I mean, that's the thing. It really, I suppose, and I won't give away the ending in case anybody actually listens to that part. But the ending, I suppose, gives you a little bit. You get to see where the guy went in his future. But other than that, it's pretty dicey throughout the whole thing that it doesn't really get moving and go anywhere. Bob?
I was good that I had the advantage of being able to go back, because I would be listening and then I would go, what? Did I miss something? We went somewhere else that I was totally not expecting. If you were listening on the radio, you just go, what happened? I don't know where I'm at. And I can't go back and review it. So I don't,
You're more dedicated.
Often make this 40-minute presentation that's pretty bad. Make it into like a 70-minute presentation by going back and re-listening to parts of it again.
Yeah, exactly. The dedication there, Bob.
Rewind enough. Replay enough. It'll be a good story. We're just not realizing it. We probably didn't rewind enough. Maybe
That's it.
I just thought there's got to be some lead into this next scene, but there never was. So I don't know why I kept.
It'll just go, whoop, oh, now we're over here. Okay.
I kept rewinding like the first 3 minutes of it. Ran out of time.
He said, I'm giving this 40 minutes, and that's all I'm giving.
Yeah.
He just listened to the first 3 minutes like 10 times, and he said, okay, I'm done now. Yeah. I totally forgive people for not making it through this episode. It's interesting. I was telling the guys, I think it's sort of the folks that were producing this were going, we want it to be artistic. We want it, and this is kind of their artsy sort of episode that really doesn't get its point across all that well. And it's just, they're just trying to say, oh, we can do a deep, weird episode. The other thing, quite honestly, is, as Jim and I were talking before the show, is you don't know what these people were on when they wrote these things. And so it sure sounds like if there's ever been a drug-impacted writing experience, this is probably it. Would you agree with that, Jim?
Yeah, I think so. I think so, definitely.
Okay. I think we'll leave it at that. Enjoy this episode of Leonard Nimoy's Mutual Radio Theater, and we shall see if we're going to bring you more of these. I will say this: what I grabbed last week and this week were the two science fiction type episodes. I think there might only be two in the show's run. Most of them are action adventure sort of things. But it's still hosted by Leonard Nimoy. So we'll debate it amongst ourselves after the show and decide whether we're going to bring you more of these. Maybe we'll bring you other science fiction shows from other shows. I just kind of like to hear Leonard Nimoy introduce things because we don't have Leonard Nimoy anymore, and it's kind of neat that he did these. Certainly last week's episode was a lot better than this week's episode. So anyway, enjoy what you can of this episode, and we will come back to this one. All right, gentlemen, let's see. Now we are on our last one, and that is, it's Star Trek time. So let's go with Star Trek. So let's do this again. So, well, Jello again. This is Buck Benny speaking. Wait, let me redo that. Jello again. This is Star Trek speaking, because that's the title of this podcast, is Star Trek Speaking Podcast. And I thought it was kind of cute because I always do. This is Buck Benny speaking, so this is Star Trek speaking. And each week we're going to talk about different Star Trek items. This week, Lower Decks just started over on CBS All Access, and we thought we'd talk a little about Lower Decks. We all watched Lower Decks, and we're going to chat about that, and then we'll go into Discovery, which was a show that's now going to start its third season here in about 13 weeks. Right after Lower Decks is over, they'll start the third season of Star Trek Discovery. We're going to talk about the first episode of Discovery. Bob just watched it for the first time this week. Jim and I have watched it. I watched it a number of times. Jim's watched it at least once. He's watched the entire Discovery season 1 and 2. Okay.
Yep.
I would love to talk about season 2. We can't do that because Bob is only season 1. So we'll let Bob continue through season 1, and we'll talk about those. We will eventually get to season 2 of Star Trek Discovery, which to me is just awesome. But let's talk, before we get started with this whole thing, let's talk a little bit about the history of Star Trek. So Star Trek starts in it has a pilot in 1965, I think. And that pilot is with Captain Pike. They do this episode, they do this pilot. The network looks at it, says, okay, this is too spacey of a thing. We see where you're going. We kind of like where you're going. So we're going to do something no one's ever done before. We're going to commission a second pilot, address our concerns, make it more action orientated, and maybe we'll pick this up as a series. So then they go to do the second pilot. For one reason or another, I hear debate over why they lost the actor that played Pike. But anyway, they end up not having Pike on there. And number one, which is a female character that they had as a lead, as second in command of the ship, they decided, well, they didn't want a female second in command. Even the women didn't like that. They said it seemed, I don't know, she was just too intense or whatever. So I love the number one character, but then they got rid of her. So then they create a new pilot where we get Spock being the Spock we're used to. He was in the first pilot, but he was very different. Second pilot, they kind of merged his character with what was number one, and he became this kind of stoic Spock that we're used to, that's highly intelligent and Vulcan and that sort of thing. So that series becomes really popular. Well, that first season becomes really popular with at least science fiction fans, and we love it. And that first season is still probably, in my opinion, the best season of Star Trek that's ever been. I love that first season. Second season goes downhill a little bit. Third season becomes quite the mess, and it gets canceled after the second season, but with the letter writing campaign and everything, it comes back for the third with very little budget, and that's why the third's not all that hot. Then it goes away. Then in the 70s, they start playing it at like 6 o'clock at night on our local TV stations, and people start watching it like crazy, and it becomes really huge, right? This series that was canceled after 3 seasons becomes this giganto thing. They decide Star Wars comes out in 77. They say, hey, we've got a science fiction thing that's really popular that people have been watching. Let's bring out Star Trek. So they create a Star Trek movie. It comes out in 1979, costs them a fortune, makes them a fortune. But they're like, and then they say, we'll try a second movie. So they do. The second movie's done with the TV directors, all the TV folks do it, so they could do it at a cheaper cost. So it's done kind of at the budget of a TV, made-for-TV movie almost. And yet the writing is so good that's the one with Khan, The Wrath of Khan, where, huge hit. Then we get 6 more movies. In the process of doing the movies, they say, hey, let's bring back the TV series. So we get Next Generation that comes in because they're trying to make the most of syndication, which they do. Roddenberry comes back, works with them on that, brings back a number one character. A lot of it, if you look at that first pilot and you look at Next Generation, he took a lot of things from the very first pilot he did and kind of brought them into Next Generation. He'd always wanted to have like a counselor on the ship, so he has a ship's counselor and so forth. Well, that show becomes popular. It lasts for 7 years. Then it spawns Deep Space Nine, which in turn spawns Voyager, and then Enterprise. So it ends up having 300 plus episodes that are all kind of in this sort of I wouldn't even say time frame, but they're sort of in that universe, that feel to them, which is different than the feel of the first episodes, right? Then years later, we get the Star Trek movies again. They're somewhat successful. The first one was pretty successful, and then the last two not so much. But then CBS All Access says, oh, let's do a Star Trek TV series. And so then they do Star Trek Discovery, which goes over all right. It has some people have issues with it, and we'll get into that in a minute. But then they say, well, that's 13 weeks we really want, because people tune in for our show and then they stop subscribing to CBS All Access. So they say, we really want to have shows throughout the year. So they're 52 every day of the year, every week of the year. I'll put it that way, every day of the year. Someday, maybe every day of the year, but every week of the year, you'll get a new Star Trek episode. And that's kind of where they're headed. And so that's why they came up with this series called Picard, that was kind of going back to the Next Generation sort of thing, but combining it with modern film techniques and so forth to make this new thing that we'll be discussing sometime later. And now they then create a third series, and the third series is called Lower Decks. And Lower Decks is animation. They're trying for a slightly different feel for it, with a comedy feel and maybe for younger kids and that sort of thing as well. And we're going to talk about that today is where our main focus is going to be. I just wanted to kind of get you where we're at. So let's do, Bob, you want to give us a summary of kind of the Lower Decks plot line? But it sort of was all over the map, so I don't know but go ahead.
So it's about a group of, this is something kind of new, the group of people that are not in command. Who, that's why I think they're on the lower decks, and it's I guess about their relationship.
Right. Let me jump in there for a second, Bob. The writers of this and the guy that created it, I heard an interview with him this week, and I knew that this is what sort of happened. I just wanted to hear it from his mouth, so that was good. He said it's essentially based on, there was a Star Trek episode, Next Generation. I'm not sure which season. I want to say around the 5th. That was called Lower Decks. Was the name of the actual episode?
Yeah, I think I remember that episode.
Yeah, and it was about folks that were not the main characters on Star Trek. It was about the people that worked in the lower decks. That's why it's called Lower Decks, right? It's about the people that work on the ship and do other jobs and things, or they might work in the. They might be part of the bridge crew or whatever, but the bridge crew, when those guys are sleeping, because you can't be on 24/7, you got to have a break, and so you'd have a night shift or something, and that's kind of the concept of it. Well, then he pitched that sort of idea to do Lower Decks that way, but as a comedy and as an animated thing, and they said, let's do that. And he was completely astounded. He just threw this idea out there. He wasn't even pitching the idea. They were just talking, and he just threw it out there as part of his discussion. And then they said, yeah, let's do it. So that he had to look not freaked out and yet go, sure, that sounds like a good, let's go with it. So anyway, so he does this thing. And so it's about, like Bob's saying, the crew members that you wouldn't normally see. They do show the bridge crew, but they show them as fairly incompetent bridge crew, and the main focus being on these ensigns that are lower in command and everything, but the things that they do in their interactions with each other. There's a group of basically 4 of them, I think, that it really focuses on. And I don't know, Jim, what else you got on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it just it has their normal life, is fixing replicators and things like that. They don't have the big experiences of first contact and all of that.
Right.
They're the subset, but they also have their issues and their adventures as well.
Well, and this episode is called Second Contact, which is kind of a humorous title as well, since we're used to First Contact. And then at the very beginning, he's talking about what the importance is of Second Contact, and you could definitely tell it's not as important as First Contact. But I think, judging from as our conversation before this started, I think I enjoyed this episode probably more than the other guys did. And it makes sense because they said they think it's maybe written for an audience that's younger and things. And so I am definitely not as mature as the other two gentlemen. So it makes sense that I might actually watch this episode more. But to me, it was just a little refreshing that it was different. One of the problems you get is if you're going to do what their plan is, which is a new episode of Star Trek every week of the year. Your problem is, boy, you do not want to burn people out and have people go, oh, it's just the same every week and I don't want to watch anymore. And all of a sudden the whole thing, your golden goose gets shot and you don't want that to happen. So I think it's really smart that they have something like Discovery that is its own sort of movie caliber, exciting adventure thing. What's going to happen? Story arcs that go the whole 13 weeks or whatever it is. And then you have Picard, which is kind of being on an adventure with an old friend, totally different feel than Discovery. And then you have Lower Decks, which is a totally different feel than those other two shows. So even though you're going to run it where you have new episodes weekly for the entire year, it's not going to feel like it's the same all the time. It's going to feel like it's different. And people might jump ship, like during Lower Decks. I think Bob and Jim are going to each give it maybe another time or two, and then they might stop watching it, and that's okay. As long as for CBS All Access, they don't give up their subscription. They want you to keep subscribing, but I totally get what they're trying to do on CBS All Access in this thing. Jim,
well,
it's written for like a younger audience or something, or what?
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. I think it's written for a younger audience. You know, I mean, obviously it's a cartoon. It's animation.
Yes.
Don't mean to put it down. It's not just a cartoon.
It's a graphic novel.
Good as we don't want a letter writing campaign about us mentioning that it's cartoons. It's animation.
But and just the way it's written and stuff, it seems more for a younger audience, and so I think they're also using it to pull younger people in, because their audience for these other shows is probably much older, and so they need to get new people to come into it and see it, and then go from there.
I'd really like to get the opinion of somebody in that age group, 14 to 20-ish. And also, the flow of it is really fast, kind of like the internet. There's a lot of things in this episode going on at once.
Yes. The pace.
So you're not,
yes.
you're not fixed on one thing. So I think that's also targeted at a younger audience. So it would be interesting to see what. Go ahead.
The showrunner, I think, is from Rick and Morty, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm guessing maybe you guys have seen Rick and Morty?
No.
Yeah. So the three of us have not seen Rick and Morty to compare this to.
It's just like Rick and Morty.
It has demographic. I have seen, Bob and I have both seen Johnny Quest. We can compare it to that. or we also, I think all three of us saw the 1970 Star Trek animated series. I will say the animation seems better than the 1970 Star Trek series. Now the writing, I'm not so sure. I did personally like that 1970 Star Trek animation series. But I don't know if it'll be interesting to see, can they keep this pace up that they did in the pilot, or is it going to slow down some? I don't know. You guys think they can keep this up? Do you?
I think they can. I mean, it's animation, and they can throw more people onto whatever they need and stuff. It's not like if that was a live action show, and trying to do that every single week might get expensive and hard to do. But with animation, you have a lot more flexibility.
This is why I invited you to the podcast, Jim, because you do a good job of setting me up for the thing I want to say next. So what I was going to compare it to is a live action show. I was going to talk about ER, because on ER, the very first episode is written by Crichton. What's Crichton's first name, guys?
Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Michael Crichton. So Michael Crichton writes this thing. It'd been sitting like in a drawer, I think, forever. And then they somehow, I think what happened is Jurassic Park did through the roof. And so then they said, what else has he got? So he's got this ER script that's been lying around forever. So they filmed this ER script. ER, the first, go ahead, watch the pilot. That's your assignment this week. Go find ER. I think it's over there on Hulu. And not for you guys, for the audience. And watch that first episode of ER. It's an insane thing to watch. It's awesome to watch. I believe, so I was reading a review of it a few years ago. I believe it said that, I want to say it was somewhere between 60 and 100 different storylines that are going on within that pilot. They're just a bunch of little bursts of story that you get. And which reminds me of this pilot, the Lower Decks. And they could not and did not attempt to keep that up on the regular series. The regular series drops way down. I mean, they certainly, that was still the thing, was to make it a hopping and popping. Oh, here's a story, here's another story, here's another story. But instead of, it went at like half the pace that it did in the pilot. This particular series, I think the guys are right. I think that it wouldn't surprise me if they're going to try and keep up this pace, and they probably can. I think they almost have to if they're going to be attracting a young audience, because we all know the young audience's attention span is a lot less, and I think that this probably dovetails into that. What's funny for me as an older person watching this, because it hops around so much, it actually loses my attention more than if it was a continuing story that I was getting involved with. I mean, I find myself getting more into a Twilight Zone episode or something that is slowly giving me more and more information as it goes, versus something like this that is hyperkinetic. But like I say, I still enjoyed the jokes. I enjoyed, I'm not giving much away. In the very first scene, I think it's kind of funny because one of the characters has a bat left and is swinging it around and ends up cutting the leg of the other character. And they're both like, oh, whoops, didn't mean to do that. But, yes.
Didn't they have a mistake in that scene as well?
I can't remember what.
I didn't catch it.
They were talking about Romulan whiskey, isn't it? Romulan ale.
Yes, Romulan ale.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in the episode, they're talking about Romulan whiskey.
I have trouble believing that that's an error. I think they got too many people looking at that. I'm sure it was a choice. Somebody probably said Romulan ale is what they were going to have, and then someone else probably said, wouldn't it be funnier if they had Romulan whiskey? We've had Romulan ale. Let's do Romulan whiskey. And they said something about, I thought it was supposed to be green or something when it's blue, and we're going,
blue.
Romulan ale is definitely blue. Who knows what Romulan whiskey is? I mean, it could have been purple.
Yeah, maybe I missed that.
The other thing about that scene is like he's seriously injured, and then like there's nothing about it after that.
Yeah,
I guess he must.
It's the future. They can fix anything.
Yeah, I guess that's supposed to be the.
Well, I don't know how unique that is. I mean, all I know is Marshall Dillon over on my Gunsmoke show that I love so much. I think somebody had kept track, and I think he got shot like 75 times in the course of the series, and he always got.
And in those days, one shot could be death, infection, and everything else. It's like,
luckily, it was always a flesh wound, so he's okay.
Yeah.
Or
This
I
guy
love
gets-
how many times they could get shot in the head, but it's always it just grazed their head, and so maybe they have amnesia for an episode or something, and that's like, what the heck. But that is television, and I'm willing to accept that. I can suspend my disbelief that much and go, okay, they taped up his bandage, his leg, and they don't want to take the time to show us that, and they moved on. Is there anything else about the Lower Decks that stands out for either of you guys, or are we good to move on?
I hate to say I felt kind of jealous watching it because I kind of wanted to be in that age group because it was kind of fun. I'm thinking, God, I'm old now. I can't really relate like the people in that age group probably can to it. And I felt myself feeling
gift to give to any kid who's 7 to 14 by giving this to them as a show that they can, because I don't know. I mean, I think for me, probably one of the reasons I ended up loving Star Trek so much because it was off the air. I mean, I never saw the originals. I think maybe I sat there with my sisters and watched a couple, but I would have been 5 or something as it's leaving the air. It was those reruns that got me into it, but I think especially it was the cartoon that really got me into and made me want to watch the live action at 6 o'clock at night on our local station because I watched the cartoon and was like, oh, I kind of like that. And really, the storylines. If you were to watch the cartoons again from the 70s, the storylines, the writers are some of the same writers that wrote the television episodes, and some of the storylines are deep and great. They're only half hour long, but they did a nice job with most of them. Some of them are a little clunky, but most of them are pretty good. Jim, anything else about this one?
I never saw the cartoons.
No. Anything else about Lower Decks? It's not Lower Decks.
If they're from the 70s, they're cartoons. Now it's animation.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
And graphic novels.
Good save, Jim. Thank you.
Yeah. No. Like you say, I think it is for a younger audience. Yeah. You know, I think it's trying to pull people into it, and I think that's going to work. But I mean, it wasn't like horrible. You know, it wasn't after I watched it. It wasn't like well, that was stupid. You know, I mean, it was watchable, and I could see a younger audience liking it even more.
Agreed. The other thing I thought, and I'll tell you what, we're going to segue right into Star Trek Discovery from this because it makes me think of Star Trek Discovery in that I think the way that it's a story arc that goes for the whole season, the way that the production value is so high, the way that they try to make it look more like a movie level caliber for Star Trek Discovery. I think all of that is another way that they're trying to reach to a younger audience, not as young as Lower Deck, but an audience of their 20s who can watch this and go, oh, I can watch this. Or they're thinking a 20-year-old might look at Next Generation and go, oh my gosh, it's not even HD and it looks hokey. Why are they in someone's living room having this adventure? I mean, because it really does feel like you're in someone's living room on that show. Whereas Discovery feels more like you're in kind of has that submarine feel to it or whatever, and yet it's expansive and it's, I don't know, it to me, a lot of it says it's done to try and reach a different audience. And heck, if it reached us and we've all three watched it, especially if we've all three enjoyed it, which we'll get into in a second, that's pretty amazing just to be able to do that. Online, as I've been reading about Discovery, a lot of folks hate that show or really like to, well, my favorite insult of it is this. I've never had to pay for a Star Trek TV show. Why should I have to pay for this one? It sucks. So, one, you have never watched an episode, so how can you be telling me it sucks? And two, I would pay 2 or 3 times the price of subscription for the monthly subscription that I pay for CBS All Access to get something as high caliber as Discovery. Discovery, I like the production value. I don't want it to look like it's on somebody's living room that they're filming this in. And to me, it works great. I love that series. And I would put Discovery, if I was going to put everything in place, I would say my number one favorite Star Trek of all time is the first season of the original series. Okay. Second best season I've ever enjoyed of Star Trek is Discovery season 2. Is that good? I love that season 2 of Discovery. And then probably following that is Discovery season 1. So I'm very happy with it. Bob,
yeah, I find it better than the the Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and stuff like that. I think it's better than those.
Really? Okay. I was surprised. But what about, you were saying before we got on air here, you were saying that one of your favorites was Enterprise. Do you think Star Trek Enterprise was of the same ballpark caliber of this series? Do you think this series Discovery is better? I mean, how would you rate those two against each other?
Yeah. I think so. I think they have a lot of the same feel to them, at least to me. You know, the other ones, like, they're big, expansive. I don't know. They're almost like they're trying to morally preach or whatever more, you know, Next Generation and stuff, where this one and Enterprise are, you know, more action oriented, you know, and that
I would
type
agree
of
with
thing.
that. I hadn't thought about that. That is a similarity. They are more action orientated, less moral of the week sort of thing than
Right.
Yeah, interesting. Huh. And more if they have a moral or whatever, it's just sort of trying to reflect humanity and the human perspective.
Right, exactly. But it's not the main driving force behind the story. I think it is with some of the other series.
Dang, you see, I in my brain I go, should I have Jim on here? Is he going to add to our? Yeah, he adds to our discussion. Bob, do I want you on here anymore? I don't know. Maybe. See, I can't vote. You guys can't vote me off the island.
He's just Bob, you know.
I'm starting my own podcast.
Just Bob podcast. I think
called Star Trek Better Than Daryl's, or Buck Benny. Sorry.
So Bob, what do you think of Discovery? I mean, you're fresh eyes to it because you just watched it for the first time this week, correct?
Yep.
Oh, that's awesome. So what is your impression? To get the audience straight, you watched the first 2 episodes?
Yep.
And that was beautiful because when they originally aired this, when it was new, they put it on CBS, regular CBS. For the opening, they showed the pilot, they showed the first 2 episodes, and then you had to watch the rest of it, like going to CBS All Access, which I think was brilliant, and that they should do. I think every season they should be doing that, putting a tease out on regular CBS and saying, come to CBS All Access to watch the rest of this. I don't know why they don't do that, but they haven't that I've seen. But anyway, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I actually enjoyed it. Like you said, the production value was just it's amazing. Like, you feel like you're like in the theater watching a movie. The other thing is, it took me a bit to get into the plot line, just because they kind of pop you into the desert.
Yes.
The other thing about it, yeah, it takes a little while to build. The other thing about it, I think that I've read things online, especially if men have said that if you're old and sexist, all the main characters are female, which I don't have trouble with. I thought that.
Jim, so why do you like it? If you're an old sexist person, just kidding.
Me?
he obviously likes it, so that's a good.
Yeah.
No, I'd say I don't understand why guys have a problem with the women being somewhat in charge. I'm okay with that.
I think the comment people made online is they don't see, some men don't see themselves in it because there's really no strong male characters in at least the first 2 episodes. Like I said, I didn't really have trouble with it, other than the Klingons, and they're kind of mean. So
that's a really good point. The first 2 episodes, and going back, Jim, I think if you and I look at it, the first 2 episodes definitely lay on the female domination of those 2 episodes, but I think what Bob's going to find out by the 3rd episode, a very strong male character comes in. Won't go into what happens to that male character as time goes on, but he's a strong character to begin with anyway.
Yeah, they definitely kind of counter that,
Yes.
and start bringing in some characters, and I think it's well balanced, especially you get into the 2nd season.
I was going to say the same thing with Pike in the 2nd season. I mean, you could put as many strong female characters as you want, and he'll balance all of that out. Because, man, when we get into 2nd season and talking about Pike, and we'll be talking about, of course, eventually when Strange New Worlds. I mean, that's where we get the whole title to the podcast is Strange New Worlds of Dimension X. I wanted to try to tie in those 2 things. I want us to be able to talk about radio shows like Dimension X and X-1. I also want us to be able to talk about Star Trek, and I thought Strange New Worlds grabbed so much of what I like about Star Trek. I love that they decided on that as the title for Pike's series. And from the moment that first episode with Pike in the second season, I was saying to myself, how do you not make a series out of this with him? He just commanded this. Every scene he's in, you're riveted to his performance, in my opinion. I mean, he's amazing at what he does. The writing for him is beautifully done, and then the acting even takes it a step further. But the first season of Discovery, like I say, very interesting as well, and great thing for us to talk about. Just a darker feel that they kind of got some complaints about, I think. I think second season, a lot of it was dealing with trying to understand what the fans were wanting and steered a little more that way by making it a little bit lighter and a little bit more fun and a little bit more action instead of dark. But on the other hand, I think it's kind of like Star Trek, the original series, or any Star Trek. You have some episodes that are lighter and funnier. You have some episodes that are darker and scarier or whatever. I think the difference is in these series, when they have a whole season arc, if you're going dark, well, you're going to have a whole dark season, essentially. And they try to throw in a few lighter episodes in there, but it's generally a dark, right, arc. If the arc is an uplifting arc, well, you're going to have a whole season of fairly uplifting episodes. So you've got to kind of go into this knowing, you might, where Star Trek, the original Star Trek, you like, oh, I really love this episode. This other episode, not so much, but this episode was. With this, you're going to go, oh, that season wasn't my favorite season. I really like this season because it's kind of like spreading out a episode over an entire season. So I think that's part of the dynamic that goes on here. Would you agree with that, Jim?
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case, because this is like a lot of shows. You basically have two different ways you can do a show where each episode is all on its own. You can watch them any order. It doesn't matter. So you can have a good, one that's happy and one that's dark, like you say, and then you have other series that you really have to watch the whole series from beginning to end in order to see if you just watch some random episode in the middle of it, then you're like, I have no idea what's going on, because you needed to see all the episodes before it to really understand it. And I think a lot of shows, that's why they did them where they were self-contained before, because in syndication and things like that, or they wanted somebody to be able to tune in and see an episode and not feel like they're completely lost because they haven't watched the episodes before.
You couldn't do that as much then. I mean, we didn't have recording, and you couldn't go back.
Yeah.
Now
watch it online. Yeah.
Now if you miss it, you can go back. If you do that on TV, because they started doing that really before they were going live. But if you do it on TV, if the audience is in episode 3 and they come in, they can't. They have much more trouble relating to it.
Yeah.
Now I can go back and watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as we're saying, most shows now are kind of done this way that are streaming shows. They're 50, and the other thing is too, just for sheer logistics of it, you can do a 12 episode arc, 13 episode arc. You start trying to do a 22 episode arc, it gets pretty hard to do, and that's probably why you don't see as much of that on regular television. Also, for the fact, just like we said, for syndication, they want to be able to just pick up and watch an episode here or there and enjoy it. And that's why certainly it's been successful to do it that way, because all your procedurals are done that way. You can sit down and catch an episode of Law and Order from any of the seasons anywhere, and hop in and watch an episode and enjoy it, and don't really have to think about what comes after it or what comes before it. With this series, if you were to drop it on regular television and catch it in the middle, it would be really tough. You pretty much have to watch it streaming, sort of thing. But that's the way this episode will always be available. At some point, maybe these shows get popular enough that somebody buys them and puts them on in syndication on one of the channels on cable or something. But I think people will realize that you pretty much have to watch all the episodes in order anyway. I like it. I like the fact that they do this. It gives you a different feel of Star Trek than you've had from any of the previous series. I think that's really cool that they do that. Certainly with Strange New Worlds is going to be interesting because I've always thought in my head, if you were to plot something out really well, you could have an overlying arc, but also have episodes that have sort of a beginning and ending and are self-contained built within that arc. And that's what they really say they're going to try and do with Strange New Worlds. They want it to be more standalone like the original Star Trek and yet have some like a season-long arc as well. So
I think you see that though.
They can pull it off. Bob?
I think other shows have done it, like the X-Files. You had individual episodes, but you also had the whole alien conspiracy thing running the whole series.
Correct.
Smoking Man. So it can be done. It's just a matter of planning it out.
Yep. I think so too. Even, I suppose, Lost kind of did that as well. I mean, you could watch standalone episodes, but they also tied into the whole series as a whole. And I think that's a smart way to go because then it kind of works either way. But I
just hope this one doesn't end like Lost.
Yes. I think like part of it, ideally, if you're doing an arc, I certainly hope that you come up with an end to your arc instead of because if you don't, you're in trouble. But I will say, I mean, some writers, unfortunately, that's what they like to do. It's very strange. For instance, best episode of Star Trek maybe ever, arguably the best one ever, Next Generation, Best of Both Worlds. They wrote the first part of that two-parter. It was a season cliffhanger in the end of the third season. And they wrote that first half, walked away, came back at the beginning of the next season and said, okay, how are we going to end this? And the main writer of it said that's what he wanted to do. I don't think the second half is nearly as strong as the first half of that episode. Luckily, it's rewarding enough that it makes it a timeless episode that everybody seems to love. But that's the way they did it a lot is you would leave an episode and then leave it hanging and then come back to it, which is really strange. But I would think you'd want to write that because the most important part is the climax of the thing that you wanted to really hit hard. And I would hope that you'd write that in. I assume for these overarching things like 13 episodes in a season that they would pretty well know this is where we're going to end. Bob?
Or they don't like have a place to go like Twin Peaks was when Laura Palmer that mystery was solved. Right. It totally dissolved because they didn't have a method to support the plot line after that.
In that case, they had an arc, but once they reached the end of it, they're like, now what? Right?
Yeah. So, that's what they did. And then part of it was the network told them, you're gonna solve it this season, and they weren't planning on it. And so they did that, and then they were like, oh shit. Oops.
So they solved it. You would think, okay, if they tell me I need to solve it this season, I would solve it at the end of the season. But did they solve it mid-season then or something?
It was basically at the end of season 1, and then the whole next season they were scrambling to try to find a new purpose in life, which they never did find. I mean, the episodes were entertaining, but they never did quite get there.
We're talking about Twin Peaks, Jim. So we're talking about having endings to arcs and things, and Bob's explaining that they had an arc that did the first mystery that kept everybody really interested, right? But then they didn't know where to go from there. It just fell apart. So if you do an arc, you've got to come up with another arc for the following season. Every season needs to have its arc. Or if you're going to change the show completely and have it be standalone, that's fine too. But you better know what you're doing.
The other thing I think they suffered from in that is they were in this little town, and they didn't have, like, when they did the X-Files, which is kind of, to me, a lot in ways similar to Twin Peaks, they had this much bigger universe. They're FBI agents. They can have all these adventures. Mm-hmm. In Twin Peaks, you're in this little tiny town with these same characters, and they're, without the Laura Palmer thing, there was just nothing left.
Jim, were you into X-Files? Did you watch any of the X-Files stuff very much, or not so much?
Yeah. I watched the X-Files.
See, I was never a big X-Files person. I don't know much about it, but I do know, for listeners, maybe you tuned into this, I did a political podcast earlier this week with my son's girlfriend, who's Alicia, that you guys got a chance to meet, and she's very well spoken and everything. But he and her have sunken deep into X-Files, and they've been watching all the X-Files. So we should have an X-Files special and have us all on here with them and hear what their input is and things. And I should just shut up and be quiet because I don't know much about it. But I think it's interesting hearing you guys talk about that series. So
yeah, I mean, it's so long, been so long, that
but having somebody
it now,
experiencing it for the first time,
yeah,
you remember back to things. I mean, like you were saying earlier, you haven't watched the first episode of Discovery in quite a while, right?
Yeah.
But still hearing Bob talk about it sparks it with us that we can chat about it, and we remember it better than you think you do, probably.
Yeah.
So at the end of the second episode, I can't remember what happens there.
So they try to, so they want to capture the Klingon leader who's united the 12 tribes.
Right.
12, is it 12? And they don't want to kill him because they makes him a martyr.
Yeah.
So at the end, the captain and second command that I think the character's name is Michael.
Yeah.
Michael
Burnham.
Yeah. They beam over. The captain gets killed, which was kind of. I thought I never expected that.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get to, because I didn't want to tell you that before you saw that. So it's completely bizarre that they introduce this character, and she's actually a really cool character. I really like that captain, and would like to introduce the captain. And then you go and you watch the second episode, she's gone, and then you're like, well, now what?
And then
in my brain, I assumed, oh, well, that's because they're going to have Michael Burnham take over and become the captain.
Nope. That's the other thing. She gets court-martialed because of the way she basically disables the captain and takes over.
Right.
Tries to attack the Klingons, so she's like imprisoned.
Right.
And so now because I haven't seen the next episode, so I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going, okay.
Give away anything more than that. It's just, it'll be interesting going on this adventure with you as we talk about it, because did that surprise you when the captain got killed in the
because I was, like you said, it took me a while to warm up to that character. I actually didn't like her at first, probably the first 15 or 20 minutes, and then I really started to like the character.
Yes.
And about that, and then I'm thinking they're going to go over there, going to capture this. It's going to be like the old Star Trek. They're going to capture him. They're going to bring him back, and everybody's going to be happy.
Yeah.
But that's not what happened. Yeah, she died. That was kind of shocking.
Well, it's essentially a little bit like, I mean, certainly it wouldn't have it would have been a greater impact over Next Generation because he's been the captain for a number of years. But it's like if in the middle of the best of both worlds, if they came back the next season and were trying to rescue the captain and he just dies, gets killed in the process, and you're like, well, now what? Riker's in charge? I don't know what's going on. And that's essentially what they did with this. I wouldn't be surprised if in the writer's room they were talking about best of both worlds. That, well, what would have happened if the captain just sort of, let's do it. Let's see what, I would really, really love to hear the conversation that led to this happening. Was this always going to happen? Did they just all of a sudden decide on it? Like they're plotting out the second episode and like, wouldn't that be interesting? And I don't know.
I think it was always planned, from seeing how the whole rest of the first season and the second season and stuff happens, I think it was planned.
You can't give it away, but yeah. I get what you're saying. Well, or the fact that from the very get-go, this was Michael Burnham's show, and all the promos and everything, she was the main person they would emphasize, which always struck me as strange in that I was going, before I saw it, before they ever aired it, right? I was like, well, wouldn't the captain sort of be one of the main characters? And they never really played up the captain. They just played up her, and that's why, because, of course, the captain dies in the second episode, so you don't want to play that character up very much.
So it's kind of a medium deck show. Discovery Medium Decks. Middle
Okay. Medium decks. I like it. I like it. See,
The middle decks.
look at this. I'm sure they'll come to us and go, "Oh, we've heard about you. We heard your podcast. We heard Jim say about medium decks. We want you guys to write it, and we'll be writing Star Trek, the medium decks, which should, I think, be very popular."
We could just, produce it ourselves and act it out and have green screen behind us of different scenes.
Oh, yes. This is great. Well, I'm in the Twilight Zone, so this is great. But here's what I want to do, because I'm just curious with you guys, because, we're going to have these weekly Star Trek podcasts, but let's go with Bob. You've seen all the series, more or less, bits and pieces, all of them, right? What order for you do you put them in? Like, let's go from top to bottom. What's your favorite of the series and working your way down?
Man, I'm with you. I like the original, but I don't know if that's because I was a kid and I watched it and I liked it so much. I don't know if it's because it's nostalgic, but I have to put that one first. I'd probably go maybe Discovery second or third, then Next Gen.
Wait, hold on a second. You've watched 2 episodes of Discovery and you already put it like second or third. That's pretty impressive. I mean,
I like it. Yeah, I liked it.
If the Discovery team is listening to this podcast, they've got to go, yeah.
maybe it's like
Space Voyager and all these and DS9.
I think maybe it's like Jim said. I like the originals because the originals were preachy, but not as much as like Next Gen.
Yeah.
I just like Next Gen for. I'd have to put probably Deep Space at the bottom.
Okay.
I think I'd put Enterprise right after Next Gen.
Okay.
Voyager. Voyager.
I didn't watch a ton of Voyager, so it's kind of tough.
They're off in their own universe, just like Voyager really is. So yeah, that's fair enough.
But did they call it Voyager because of the first Star Trek movie? Is that why?
That was Voyager until they figured out it was really Voyager.
Voyager. Yeah. I think I'd have the episodes I've seen of Voyager. I'd have to put it after.
Way to play your geek card, Jim.
Your official card holder now.
I've got a royal flush on geekness over here. I'm going to mention the first Star Trek movie.
I try to not mention the first Star Trek movie as much as possible. Talk about just a
what you didn't like hours and hours of the ship moving through the
it was like really you think this is gonna people are gonna like this?
It was riveting.
I'm surprised they made any movies after that, to tell you the truth.
I was saying to myself before I went to see that movie, goodness gracious, I hope they don't show us a bunch of acting. I really want to see just 20-minute shots of the ship from every possible angle, and if they run into some sort of space creature, boy, I want to see that space creature. The Gorn, there was no beautiful passing shots around the Gorn's head for 25 minutes or anything they could have done. That is riveting theater.
Have you seen the YouTube clip of Kirk playing a video game with the Gorn?
Yes.
That's hilarious.
It is awesome.
I haven't seen that one.
It's new, and it's real. It's old William
suit. So they're the two of them are sitting there playing, and then they Kirk's like, I thought you had my back. Yeah. And the Gorns, then they get up and start fighting each other.
Exactly.
And they have the music, and Kirk is trying to pound him in the head. Yeah. And then he stops and goes, he bends over his back.
This thing that always works so well against people.
He bends over his back, so we're too damn old to fight like this. It's pretty funny.
For those of you wondering about that clip is available on YouTube somewhere. So just type in Kirk and Gorn and you'll find it.
I will be doing that after we're done here.
Yes, Jim will look that up. It's certainly worthwhile watching because how long is that clip? 2 minutes?
If that, maybe a minute and a half or so.
Yeah, a minute and a half or so. It's definitely worth watching. I think it might be an ad for a game or something.
It is, because they're playing the video game at the beginning.
Yes, but it's not. It's not a start. Is it a Star Trek game even?
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
it is. Okay, I couldn't Like,
I think it's
related game, you know.
the game is pretty old
Assassins
now.
4. Ooh. Anyway, but Jim, how about you go through your series, the order that you kind of place them in?
I would probably say Enterprise.
Is
I
your
like
top?
Enterprise. Yeah, I think I like that one the best, and then probably Discovery,
Okay.
and then the original. I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Do the
probably.
others even make your list? Maybe they're not even on the list. They're just like too low.
Yeah, I mean, the Next Gen probably, and then I don't know. It's a toss up between Voyager, Deep
By
Space.
that time, they're so low on your list, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I'm not finding myself going back and look, I watched that Voyager episode. Oh, look, I got to see that again because
True.
I mean, there's the channel that we have that it seems like they have Star Trek on almost 24 hours a day, all the different episodes and stuff like that. And I find that I'll go back and watch the Enterprise episodes, and a few of the Next Gen, but the other ones, I don't really need to go watch them again.
I think that's really interesting because Enterprise only ran, like I said, 4 seasons. And for the most part, people consider it the reason that Star Trek kind of died. I've never given it that much negative thought about it because I just think I wouldn't blame that show. It's just the fact that we'd had Star Trek for, at that point, 20 years straight on TV. It was, of course, going to lose some direction, and people were going to have it be less popular at some point. So I don't think it's a reflection on that show. I think, like you, I would place that show a lot higher than most people would place it. For me, like I say, it's the original Star Trek, just because it started everything off, and man, that first season is incredible. Then really probably Discovery comes next, and then I mean, I'll be controversial out there or whatever, but I probably would put the Picard miniseries next after the.
You didn't tell us that was an option.
I had to
know
watch
because I wanted to be able to take it myself and make you guys look so, which I've done. So 'cause I think it's really well done, and overall, I'll take it even over Next Gen. So
yeah,
that's way out there. But then I put Next Gen after that, and then after that comes probably Enterprise, and then DS9, and then taking up the rear is probably Voyager. Now I will say, if you look at my hierarchy, Voyager isn't terrible. I mean, I would watch episodes of Voyager. It just shows how much I like the entire run of this, all the shows. But I just think, unfortunately, I think online Picard and Discovery get bashed way more than they should. And like I say, so often it's by people who haven't even watched them. They just bash because they refuse to pay for them or whatever. And I think with the production values, with the fact that I get whatever it is, 15 hours of Star Trek or something versus waiting 3 years for a movie and getting 2 hours, I'd much rather this than that. I love the fact that we might eventually be getting a new Star Trek episode every week of the year. And maybe Lower Decks, like we say, I might not want to tune into as much. But the fact that I might be getting episodes of Picard and episodes of Discovery and episodes of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, I think that's exciting. I think this is a very exciting time for Star Trek fans. And it's especially telling that all 3 of us rate Discovery so high on our list. That's kudos to the folks that write it. Kudos to the writers. Kudos to the everybody along the whole thing. All the producers, the directors. I mean, they've really done a bang up job. And I got to say, especially to reach a shout out to Riker. Great, I can't remember Riker's name. Somebody help me with Riker's name.
Jonathan Frakes.
Yeah, Jonathan Frakes, thank you. Yeah, when he directs an episode, I hear so many good things about it from the actors that are in it, so many good things from the production team, everything. And when you watch the episodes, they are some of the best put together episodes. I just love what he does. And he now is doing, 2-3 episodes of each series as they're going. And he's done Orville. Oh, we haven't talked about Orville. Let me ask about Orville. Have you guys watched any of Orville? Do you think anything of that?
I actually like it.
Good.
I like it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it better than probably Next Generation.
There you go. I was surprised.
Other one.
I was, and they knew they were going to surprise us. I mean, went into it thinking it's going to be like a comedy, and it's going to be like a parody, and it's going to be more like the Airplane movies or whatever done with Star Trek. But it's really not. It's really an homage to. I mean, really, it's an homage to Next Generation. It is essentially. It's not really a takeoff on the original series. It's not like Discovery. It's like saying, okay, I'm going to take and make Next Generation stories now with some characters that aren't quite the same, but are darn similar, but do it in a funny way and do it in an entertaining way. And yeah, I love that series. I think it's great.
Well, I mean, I like that it kind of takes it can be somewhat serious, telling the story, and then they can just have a scene that's just, total parody and
Yes.
and then other humorous things. And so it's kind of, you get a serious story going on the whole thing, but then it has parts within it that are just
right.
insane or, and so.
Well, and the first season, I got the more the impression of they're trying to figure out what's that tightrope we're walking between comedy and between serious. You'd end up with some episodes that erred on the side of being too comical and they lost a little bit of the emphasis they would have. You got some that were too serious and they lost a little bit of the comedy. But I'd say by the second season, they had that pretty well worked out. And the third season is coming up. It's still not out yet, right? It's coming up soon.
Yeah, who knows now? It might be a year or two from now for
with everything going on, who knows? But I do know that
for those of you watching this a long time in the future, this is 2020.
Yes. No, that's good.
Weird things happened in 2020. Ask your grandparents about it, what it was like in 2020.
Well, I'll run reruns of my podcasts that I did. I've done podcasting so long. Some of my early ones are like 2005. I'll enter one from 2005 and it'll mention something, and then someone will write me an email saying, well, that thing you said, when is that happening or whatever? So, well, it happened 15 years ago. So that doesn't help. It's always good to mention the date. It is 2020. And
we also did make it through the millennial 1999-2000 thing. The computers didn't crash.
Yes.
So I think we're okay.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Bob. No, but we love doing this podcast for you folks. I hope you keep on tuning in. It is fun to talk about. I'm delighted that we get to talk about Star Trek. I'm delighted that we get to talk about these other great series from radio that we get to chat about. Please join us every week as we do this. Any parting comments, Bob, for anybody, or just Bob, I should say?
I'd say if you're bashing Discovery, I don't understand. Yeah, I would read a bunch of reviews, and after watching, I didn't understand why people bashed it so much.
Yes. Well, they didn't watch it, so there you go. Tim, any parting things from you about this?
Yeah, definitely stick with Discovery because it's a good show. I'm looking forward.
And Jim would also like you to, on Netflix or whatever you're watching, go back and watch Enterprise because he endorses it highly.
That's right. I want a new season.
Yes.
and also I'm pretty sure that Jonathan Frakes really likes your shout out. He's gonna say, I got a shout out on podcast.
Especially he's going to like my shout out in that I didn't remember his name other than his character's name. Shout out to the director Riker.
That Riker guy, whatever his name is, he's good. I don't know who he is, but
You can't have a more ringing endorsement than that, I tell you.
pretty much.
Well, let me jump on something you just said because I thought it was interesting. I honestly would be cool with, because they're trying to find more series to do and things. I would love for them to revisit Enterprise and do it with higher production values and everything. And I know that'll never be the case because they're going to go, hey, that was a failed series. Why are we going to bring back a failed series? But
I think
I like that it was.
It ran longer than the original. The original only ran 3 seasons. This ran 4. See, it was a big success, man. Anyway,
I like that it was the early, it was showing the early times of the space travel and stuff like that. So it wasn't, like, oh, we're flying around the big next gen ship. Everything is great and everything, works perfect. And, all our interactions, it's like it's showing like those earlier, rougher days of trying to deal with space travel and trying to deal with.
Oh,
I think
Jim is such an addition to our podcast. He gives me so much more to talk about and think about. One thing we haven't gotten into is the fact that this series Discovery takes place, I think, 3 years after the Pike episode of the original series, and a decade before Kirk takes over the ship, right? So, does it bother you at all that it looks so futuristic compared to what you would kind of picture? That it doesn't look like it takes place a decade before the original Star Trek series, or can you accept?
I thought it looked too futuristic, but it does have a dark feel to it, though. More like Enterprise. It's not as cheery like Next Gen. Right. It's kind of that submarine feel.
Yes, that's the same thing I was saying. I think I'm willing to give it a pass because to me, if Roddenberry could have done this production in 1966, he would have. But he couldn't. He did the best he could at the time, and he used paper mache rocks and everything.
Yeah.
I don't think when you're showing this era of, I don't want to see paper mache rocks. If you can do real rocks and you can do phasers that look better, and you can then do it.
Or like the neighbor kid said. I remember talking to the neighbor kid about the episode with the Horta. He was like, "Yeah, well, it looked like a walking carpet."
Yeah. Jim, what do you think about this? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is to me how it looks futuristic. Well, it is supposed to be in the future, and it's just a matter of the production capabilities of the time. I guess now with Discovery you have very, very detailed, lots of stuff going on, and then you have like the original Star Trek and even Next Generation. They're kind of like the Tesla design of an interior car.
Yes.
It's very sparse. A couple of few things in there, but not nearly as much stuff crammed in as what you would see in Discovery in their ship.
I would, yeah, I agree. And I was going to say something about that too, about I think it's kind of funny that, and Bob doesn't know this, and it's not much of a spoiler, but the second season, they really kind of bend over backwards to explain why the Enterprise doesn't have 3D technology and things, and it only has just regular view screens, and they make a big point of it'll always have just 2-dimensional view screens, and it's like, really, they're gonna have a ship, and they're gonna say, you know what, there's new technology out there that we can use, but we're not going to use that. We're
never going to retrofit it.
Yeah. Really, because like there's all sorts of holograms in Discovery.
Right, but they're not going to use those on Enterprise. They're just trying to explain why Enterprise has this. But so we're now retroactively going, so I guess Kirk was flying around in a ship that had flat screens and everything, and everybody else on all the other ships always had holograms and things. But whenever we've seen a shot from inside another ship during Star Trek, they never had holograms either. So it's like, whatever. But that's something I'm really willing to let go. I don't think they need to explain why they had those, but whatever. That's up to them and the fans to figure out. But thank you again for joining us for a more deep Star Trek conversation. Join us next week for more Star Trek Speaking, the new podcast. Exciting, burning up the nation. I'm sure it's going to get downloaded 1 million times. So enjoy. Ta-ta, everybody. Jim, you want to say goodbye to everybody?
Bye.
Bob?
Live long and bye.
Live long and bye. I like that. So, Bob, you gonna wish him a good evening and a good morning?
Yes, I can't say America anymore because it's worldwide. I got caught in that the first time we were on.
Yes, you did.
Goodbye, world. Have a good day. And
Goodbye, world. Do we need to send somebody to your house, Bob?
We're not going away permanently, guys. We'll be back next week. Anyway, enjoy. Bye, everybody.